So we're looking at number 7 on page 60 here. Given that f and g are differentiable functions, and then they give you some information about f prime of certain values, g and g prime. Function h is defined here. Find h prime of 0. So again, I'm not going to plug 0 in until I find h prime first. So we're going to go ahead and take the derivative of this function h for ourselves. So I'm just going to kind of read out loud to myself. That's still how I tackle these. This is g of sine of x. So I have an inside and an outside. So I've got that chain rule. So I'm going derivative of the outside, keep the inside, times the derivative of the inside. So the derivative of sine should give me cosine. Okay, so inside, outside, derivative of the outside, keep the inside times the derivative of the inside. Plus, when I read this, it's 5x times cos of x, and we said times, and there is an x on each side, so I know I've got to use product rule there. Okay, so I'm going to go plus the first times the derivative of the second, plus the second times the derivative of the first. All right, so again, just a lot of self-talk. Talk yourself through those rules. Once you've found h prime, I don't really clean it up too much. I kind of just go in and plug in that 0. I really only clean up if I have negative exponents, and then I kind of just carefully plug in my 0. And then there's a couple nice pieces. I notice in this section I have 5 times 0 times really who cares. This whole section is just 0. 0 times anything is 0. Again, going back to picturing the graph, the cosine of 0, if I picture that cosine graph, the cosine of 0 is 1. So here I'm just left with g prime of, and now I need the sine of 0. So again, I'm just picturing the sine curve. The sine of 0 is 0. So again, the sine of 0 is 0. So now I have g prime of 0, technically times 1, which is the cosine of 0. Plus, I have the cosine of 0, which again is 1 times 5 is just 5. And then using that information they gave me, I know g prime of 0 is equal to negative 2. So I have negative 2 times 1 plus 5, which should get us 3. So again, the calculus part is literally just the derivative, and then we're just using our algebra skills to evaluate after I plug in those zeros for myself. Okay, I would say a lot of times you'll see the chain rule written out in this g of notation, so we'll kind of get to practice that today a little bit. The second big part is the repeated chain rule, okay? And that's 8 and 9, and very, very common questions, but we call this repeated chain rule. So we're really going to talk about how we're going to rewrite these first. So when you see a trigonometric function squared, you want to stick a bracket around it. We're going to call it the sine of 4x, and it's really that quantity squared. Okay? We're going to move where that squared is, put a nice bracket or parenthesis around it, and put it outside. So this is called repeated chain rule because there's actually 2 insides. My first inside is this 4x, and its outside is sine, but then this whole thing is inside the squared function. So again, it's a repeated chain rule because it's kind of like a double chain rule. So I'm just going to start with the outermost function, which would be this power of 2, and I'm going to take its derivative. So I'm going to bring down the 2, just keep saying to myself, keep the inside, the whole inside, don't touch it, raise to the first power, times, now I need the derivative of the inside, so I'm not just focusing in on this, the derivative of the sine of 4x, so inside, outside, the derivative of sine is cosine, keep its inside, then times the derivative of that inside, which is 4. And then I'm just going to multiply any coefficients together, such as the 4 and the 2, so I'm going to call that 8 sine of 4x, cos of 4x. Okay, and again, nothing can go inside your trig functions. Those are always going to remain 4x. Don't try to multiply any numbers inside there. All right, so we just call this a double chain. We have two insides. We start with the outermost, keep the inside. Then we go to the inside, we take its derivative, keep its inside, and then the final inside derivative. All right, so let's try 9. Let's go ahead and rewrite it. So it's going to be the cosine of 8x squared all to the third power. And then go ahead and try your chain rule. Mila, I think you got it. Go for it. Oh, no, just walk me through how you took your derivative.
3 cos of 8x squared to the second.
Good.
Times sine 8x squared times 16x.
That's perfect. Very nice. Any questions on how we can walk through that one or help anyone? Okay, so then on the cleanup part, I'm just going to multiply any terms I can. So I'm going to multiply the 3, the 16, and the negative. Those are all outside, and the x as well, I guess. So I think we get negative 48x. And then when you go back to rewrite this, you're going to put that exponent back on the trig function. So I'm going to call it cosine squared of 8x squared, and then the sine of 8x squared. Okay, so you'll see all multiple choice putting it back right on top of that trig function. All right, so I don't have a ton to practice with you. Again, I want you to kind of just practice on your own. Let's do the same thing and kind of just jump up on the boards or windows or chalkboards or whatever. So I'm just kind of looking at yesterday's sheet. So turn to that chain rule sheet, page 63. I just want to kind of talk through, just to be careful on 8, like that's definitely a product rule with your chain. Be super careful as you're going through here. So let's kind of fill in the blanks. We'll go 8 through 10. And then let's go 16 through 18. 21, and then we're going to try some on the back here. These are more of like the AP style questions. We'll tackle 26 and 27. Okay. All right, so again, you can kind of just spread out, grab a marker or wherever you're working, and we'll just kind of talk them out.